We slipped away just in time. Tilkitchi was a fool to think we'd ever stay after he escaped.
The carnival won't stop hunting us.
No, it won't. Let me think.
The train's coming a long way, so it'll have to stop to take on water. That's where we strike.
Agreed. I'll deal with any sentries, then rig explosives on the track.
Yes, and I'll rally our fighters.
When I blow the lines, the train will be trapped. So when you hear the blast, you need to attack them with everything you have.
It's good. But you know that there's a chance the men may not come. You may set off those explosives and find you're out there all alone. You know that.
I guess I won't know either way until I set it off.
Man makes plans, and God laughs. As it turned out, the small town where we would ambush the train had a significant enemy presence. Those troops would have to be dealt with before the explosives could be set.
Hello Warfighters, War is Hell. Welcome to the very last episode of this Battlefield 1 series. It's been amazing going through and taking a look at some of the history that is being told in the game and kind of talk about some things that really took place. Over the entire series, I learned quite a bit from the origin of the term tanks to Lawrence of Arabia to the Red Baron, a lot of cool things. This is going to be the last video. It's going to be kind of short from a historical standpoint. I do kind of want to introduce what we're going to be seeing in the next part of this series. I mean, it's not technically the same series, but anyway, with all the things that we have taken a look at, I wanted to kind of end here at this particular war story and talk about the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Not something everybody knows, but it's a pretty big deal. A couple years ago, it was the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and there's a lot of great discussions that were out there. So I definitely recommend just going out on YouTube and looking this up. You'll learn a lot of great things, but I'm going to give a very, very brief summary of this so you guys are aware of it, the impact of it, because it is a very, very big deal in this video. So, the Sykes-Picot Agreement is also known as the Asia Minor Agreement, so maybe you've heard of it as that. It was signed the 16th of May 1916, and this agreement was basically written by the United Kingdom and France. So Sykes was the British envoy, oh hello, and France was represented by Picot. Russia agreed to the decisions that were everything in here, but things do get complicated with the Asia Minor Agreement, which we'll talk about here in a bit. The idea of this agreement was really trying to decide what would happen with the territory of the Ottoman Empire should the Triple Entente end up winning World War I. What it did was it divided the Middle East basically to increase the sphere of influence of both the United Kingdom, France. Those were the two biggest ones, and of course there were some plans for Russia, an independent Arab nation to some degree, and there was an area which was called the Brown Zone. It was basically going to be determined at a later date. This was an area that included Jerusalem and other areas of the Holy Land. The borders that were created were primarily artificial to ease negotiations, and so what I mean by they were artificial is there's a lot of ways that you can kind of decide where territory is, who has what, beyond just what's easy. You take a look at areas like Iraq, for example, border of Iraq and Syria. It is a straight line. That's part of what was decided in the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It was basically just a line at that point. Now that seems like it would be very easy for negotiations, but it caused so many problems because it didn't take into account some other things that you want to use in helping develop a border. Things like your religious diversification in an area, your ethnic diversification in an area, and a number of other important factors that typically prove critical to a success of any type of agreement. I'm out of everything. That's why I'm just trying to shoot this Anyway, many of the borders that you see in the Middle East today have caused a number of issues because of this desire for simplicity of negotiations. It's been a significant cause of some of the tensions and issues that we see in the Middle East today. One of the biggest examples of this was Kurdistan. If things like the Kurdish people, their unique ethnic group, beliefs, things like that, an independent Kurdistan could have been formed, then you don't have these Kurdish groups operating in Iraq and Turkey, because they would technically have their own nation. I mean, if you had taken these things into consideration, which they obviously didn't. Also didn't take in, of course, as I mentioned, religious separation, which has proved to be a very big deal in some areas as well. So you take a look at issues in the Middle East, and I'm not saying that the Sykes-Picot Agreement is the sole contributor to the problems in the Middle East. Don't get me wrong, these things are very, very complex, and honestly, you cannot pin it on one thing. But this one agreement has caused a lot of strife that we still feel today, and that's why a couple years ago when they were celebrating the 100th anniversary, there was a lot of discussion about it. How would things have changed? There was even one discussion that I had watched where a group of people basically got together and decided if they were to rewrite the Sykes-Picot Agreement today, how would the borders look? And that was really interesting to be able to see what type of factors that could have been taken into consideration. But France, UK wanted to expand the sphere of influence. That was the primary purpose of why they were going into this agreement. Not really so much for the sake of what's going to be best for those in the Middle East. But I'm going to go into just a little bit more of it here in a second, but we got a cutscene, so hold on. Alright, we'll let it keep going. One of the other things I wanted to discuss as far as the consequence of the Sykes-Picot Agreement that really shapes the world today is, if you guys recall from the previous video where I talked in the Arab uprising, one of the biggest motivations for a lot of the Arab fighters, 2 for 1, was this idea of an independent nation. Arab nationalism was on the rise, and the idea was that if the Triple Entente ended up winning the war, the British essentially promised that there would be an independent Arab state. With this Sykes-Picot Agreement being made public, and with the Arabs really seeing how France and Great Britain were going to carve up the Middle East for their own benefit, and that the promises of the British really wouldn't be upheld in the way that the Arabs thought, it caused a lot of mistrust between the Arabs and the West. And this again is another thing that really impacts some of the things that we experience today. It was one of the biggest betrayals in Arab history as far as international relations. So the Sykes-Picot Agreement, huge, major impact on the world today, and for a lot of things that we see even between the end of World War I and now. So again, I recommend kind of reading up on it. It's pretty cool. So with this being the last video, one of the things that I definitely wanted to stress as we kind of wrap this up is, yes, I learned a lot out of this, but one of the things that definitely stood out for me, and I've kind of hit on this a little bit in this particular video, is how important World War I is to the world that we live in today. A lot of people, and I will say Americans definitely do this too, look at World War II as the defining moment that shaped the 20th and to some degree even the 21st century. But traces of what we experience today, how international relations are, a lot of how we perceive the world changed because of World War I. World War II is important, yes, but there's a lot of things that you can point to kind of say that World War II was a continuation of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, for example, did not treat the Germans too well. It basically destroyed their economy for a while, allowing for a power vacuum to arise and for nationalism to take place. There we go, Nazi Germany. At the same time, the Japanese felt absolutely gypped by the Treaty of Versailles as well. The Japanese contributed a lot to World War I. However, their contributions didn't match the rewards that they would end up getting in the final peace agreement. Sure, they did get some things, but again, it didn't match what they want. And that's one of the things that contributed, of course, to them joining the Axis powers during World War II. At the end of World War I, it was, at the time, obviously the most destructive war ever. Different estimates that I've seen as far as casualties go for the Triple Entente was 5,525,000. For the Central Powers, 4,386,000. But when you consider wounded, MIA, civilian deaths, this is absolutely devastating. For Russia, it changed their government in a way that nobody had really thought possible prior to the war. And many of even the military tactics that are used today can find their origins from World War I. This is the first time we had seen aviation, first time we had seen armored warfare and combined arms. So I really hope that you guys learned something through this particular series. Definitely go back and check out some of the other videos if there's something that interests you. The different war stories was able to provide me some different backgrounds and some different storylines to kind of discuss about World War I. Again, I learned a lot. I hope you did too. So with this being the end of the Battlefield 1 video, what that means is we get to start Battlefield 5 pretty soon. This is going to be quite the challenge for me to kind of go through. I've been able to see a lot of things and play through a lot of missions, and there's really not a lot that matches up with what happened historically. There are some things, of course, that do line up, but I do want to make sure that you all understand what is actual history and what is not. So it's going to give me a great opportunity to research World War II, which for me is the most interesting conflict to study because of the scale, some of the amazing battles that took place. Don't get me wrong, I loved World War I. I feel like I know World War II a lot better than World War I, so this was a great opportunity to kind of learn some things, but I'm really excited for what lies ahead with Battlefield 5. Once I get done with that, though, I don't know exactly how things are going to go and what's going to happen to this particular series. But anyway, let's get through Battlefield 5 first. And then we'll kind of worry about that. Man, I forgot how many of these things I have to end up throwing. But yeah, I do want to go through it pretty soon. There's the new episode 2 for the war stories that's coming out. I think it's called like The Last Tiger or something like that, which is going to be really great to talk about some of the armored warfare of World War II, but we'll see how that one unfolds. Anyway, man, it's crazy to think that this is done. It took me a lot longer than I wanted to kind of go through it. I just forgot about doing it sometimes, but with Battlefield 5, this is not one that I'm going to necessarily forget doing. I want to make sure I get this out pretty quick too. So, as we're finishing this mission up, just let me know in the comment section if there's anything in particular that you liked about this series, if you thought that this was kind of interesting, being able to go through the campaign, play it out, and you kind of learn something along the way. I'm always trying to do stuff that kind of entertain you guys and make you a little bit smarter when it comes to military conflict as well. But that's going to be it here for this video as I get to a safe distance, and here we go. Nice. All right, well, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video if you enjoyed what you saw. If you can donate to the Patreon to help out, it really does go a long way to be able to help produce this type of content. It means a lot. And of course, join our Discord. But thanks for watching. War is hell. You don't have to worry because Warfighters, I've got your 6.
Vengeance can be a sweet or bitter brew. How did you find it, Zara? And you're right, we do need to think bigger, act bigger. Maybe even the Suez Canal. Tell me, would
do you know about battleships?